morning and welcome to another episode of the Gone Fishing podcast here on the Five Reasons Sports Podcast Network. I do just want to again encourage you guys like, comment, subscribe. Five Reasons recently hit 50,000 followers on Twitter, so a hearty thank you all for that. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe on the YouTube channel so that we can continue to grow there and continue to provide you guys the content that you want. So it is May 8th, 2023. The Marlins just went through arguably their worst week of the season, going 1-5, getting swept by the Atlanta Braves, and then losing 2 out of 3 in Chicago. And I'm going to get into the players of the week here really quickly, but I want to touch on what the overall theme of this is going to be, and it's going to be how do the Marlins bridge the gap between themselves and the Mets and the Atlanta Braves. And it's obviously not going to be as simple as start spending, like those teams, because that's just never going to happen with the Marlins. But that's something that we will touch on today is what are some of the tangible moves that they can make now to help bridge that gap. And so on that note, I do want to get into the players of the week. It was slim pickings on the major league roster this week, obviously 1-5. And not a particularly competitive 1-5 when you look at the series in Atlanta. Luis Arraez is your Major League Player of the Week for the hitters. He hit 348, 375 on base percentage, 391 slugging for 766 OPS. A little underwhelming for him. That's what his down weeks look like, everybody. And he's still Player of the Week on the big league roster. He's just been fantastic for the Marlins. And your pitcher of the week. Now, this is one that I struggled with a little bit just because, quite frankly, there weren't a ton of options here either. And I ended up landing on Huascar Brazoban, 1-0 or 0-0, 1 hold, 3 1/3 innings, no earned runs, 3 hits, 3 walks, 6 strikeouts. Brazoban has been fantastic of late. He hasn't given up a run in an outing since mid-April. And he's been really one of the guys helping to hold the bullpen together. It feels like it's kind of been different guys popping at different times of the year. Early on it was AJ Puck and Floro. Floro still pitching really well, but Puck was really dominant in the early going. But now you see different guys starting to step up. Brazoban, while he was good in April, he really started to hit his stride mid to late April, and he's just been fantastic since then. And at the minor league level, we have Jupiter outfielder Jorge Caballero. He hit 565, got on base at a 583 clip, and had a 696 slugging for a 1279 OPS. 23 years old in single A, so he is a little bit older than the competition there. You have to imagine that the Marlins are getting close to looking at a call-up for him, see what Caballero can do at Beloit. And your minor league pitcher of the week, for the first time this year in the 2023 season, maybe for the last, you have Yuri Perez. He went 2-0 this week, pitched 11 innings, struck out 20, allowed 2 earned runs, 4 hits, 3 walks, and a 108 batting average against. So Yuri Perez was just absolutely nasty this week. And that's actually going to be a really good jumping off point. Because when you look at where the Marlins are at this point in the season, if you were to look at what the expectations were coming into the season, and you were going to say, well, you know what, let's take a look a month and a week in, what has been the most disappointing unit on this team? And I think it's without question the starters. And it's not that they've been awful. I think that they've been just below average rather than, egregiously terrible. But you're looking at it from the perspective of people expected this to be a top 10 rotation in baseball, and it hasn't even been close to that. You look at some of the injuries you've gotten between Trevor Rogers and Johnny Cueto. Sandy's disappointed. He had a fantastic start yesterday. I do want to show Sandy a little bit of love for that. But he just hasn't been Sandy this year. Luzardo's been good, not great. not necessarily living up to that potential that I think a lot of us feel like he has. Um, it's just a matter of trying to get him to work a little bit deeper into games. And then I think the same thing can be said for Edward Cabrera. Cabrera's kind of been hot and cold this season. Really volatile starter. He can walk 8 guys. He can strike out 12 on a given day, just depending on how he kind of feels. Braxton Garrett had been pretty good. He got shelled in his last outing in Atlanta. But overall, Garrett's been pretty solid for the Marlins this year across all of his starts. You got Brian Hoeing in the rotation, and I like Hoeing. His stuff has definitely ticked up a little bit this year. He's hitting 94, 95. I think he's got a really nice slide piece as well. But I do think it's fair to wonder, when do the Marlins, when it comes to bridging the gap, and you look at the rotation that like an Atlanta has, they've got 5 fantastic starters. I mean, you're talking Fried, Strider, Elder, Morton, and Wright. All those guys could be at least the number 2 in Miami, and Strider and Fried probably the ones in Miami so far this year. So I think it's fair to wonder, when do the Marlins hit the Yuri Perez button? You're 17 and 18. They're far from out of it. I don't think it's a situation where, it would be, I don't think it would be futile to give this a shot. I think this is a really decent spot to kind of try to infuse a little bit of energy into the team. I know that the lineup probably needs it a little bit more than the rotation does at this point, but I think Yuri Perez, just being your far and away best prospect, it sends a message in the locker room to guys that, hey, we're doing whatever we can to win. And I think that when you're aggressive like that, it just kind of, it shows, it's a showing of good faith from the front office to the guys on the field, because it says, we think we can win with you guys. We just need this little extra boost. And so I think when you look at the Johnny Cueto situation and him getting banged up in his first rehab start in Jacksonville, and between that and Craig Mish reporting that this could be, in his opinion, it's not necessarily reporting, but he has reported that the Marlins are considering moving him up. I don't know whether that means to AAA or to the big league roster. But we could see Yuri sooner than later, according to reports. And when you pair that with what happened with Johnny Cueto on Saturday, you do start to kind of see where the door is cracking open, over these next few days for Perez. And then you look at a potential rotation of, Sandy, Luzardo, Cabrera, Perez, and then I guess Garrett would be your 5 for now until Rogers comes back. And it just, again, it just fortifies the rotation to an extent that, you're not having to go with a Brian Hoeing, as much as I don't mind Brian Hoeing. And you're not having to do bullpen games. I mean, the strain that this team has put on their bullpen has been remarkable. I'm surprised that they haven't imploded just completely yet, because of the fact that you're barely getting 5 innings a start out of some of these guys. And then you go 14 innings yesterday, which was, again, another fantastic showing of the bullpen. I think everybody that pitched out of the bullpen was really pretty strong yesterday. And then you look at, well, okay, so we understand that the Marlins, I think, have a contender level bullpen. I think that they're fine where they are in the bullpen. They can compete with that. With the rotation, I think getting healthy and perhaps calling up a Yuri Perez, while it doesn't fully bridge that gap, again, it makes you competitive with the likes of the Atlantas of the world and the Mets of the world, even the Phillies, really. Because I mean, I know the Phillies are a little bit down, but I don't think anybody really expects that to continue. But then you're looking at, okay, well, how do the Marlins get to where they need to go in the field and in the everyday lineup? I mean, you have guys that are quite frankly underperforming. I look up and down the lineup. I see Luis Ariz hitting really well. I see Yuli Gurriel pulling his weight. I see Brian De La Cruz, who's, as much as the fan base, is polarized on him, he's doing more than some of the other guys in the lineup. I see, John Birdie and Garrett Hampson. Again, they're both playing pretty well, but I just wonder if their skill sets aren't too similar. You've got a catching position that is, quite frankly, the worst hitting catching position in baseball between Fortes and Stallings. And Fortes, to his credit, at least at the plate, has started to show some life again. But there's still major changes that need to be made there when you look at, some of the catching talent in the division between JT Realmuto and Sean Murphy and Francisco Alvarez, and even Kybert Ruiz. And it's not to say that you need to have one of those guys, but you need to have a major league level starter. And I think the Marlins are lacking that at the catching position right now. At least with the way that these guys are currently playing. And then you look at some of the players that you thought were going to be some of the best players on this team. I'm looking at Jazz Chisholm. I'm looking at him, specifically at the plate. Because, I mean, the defense hasn't been – there's still the occasional mental error, but I think his fielding this year has been better than his hitting. And for a guy that's trying out a new position, especially a position like center field for the first time, it's just not – you can't get that from him, especially when you were going into the season and this was going to be your guy. This was going to be your all-star. This guy was, people had him as a dark horse for the MVP. And I'm not seeing it right now. And I know what Jazz can do, and I've seen what he can do when he gets right. But right now there's just way too much swing and miss in his game to really impact the lineup the way that the Marlins need him to. You look at the shortstop position, Joey Wendell comes back. He hits the big RBI triple in yesterday's game. Hopefully he can kind of stabilize that situation for a little bit. Third base, Jean Segura has the lowest weighted runs created plus in baseball of all qualified hitters so far. The Marlins signed him because he's been, raking lefties pretty much his entire career, and he's hitting under 100 against lefties. You have to think that trend will turn around, but, at some point, you get to May here. May turns to June pretty quickly, and it's like either this is going to turn around or it's not. And it's how much of the season do you want to let slip away while you're being patient with these guys. And like I said, Segura's been there. He's done it. He's been a productive player in baseball. I'm not saying that they should absolutely outright bench him yet, but it is time to start, looking at the clock here. This is a 17-18 ball club. The season can go either way here over the course of these next 10 to 15 games. The Marlins go 9-6, 10-5, 8-7. They're fine. They're hanging on. But I don't know if the Marlins could survive a 5-10 stretch here. I think that, and it's not to be over dramatic, but I don't think this is a team that's built to go on a really long, sustained run. This is a team that's built to kind of grind out those one-run wins with the bullpen that they have. And so I think that they need to, if they're going to go on some kind of run, they need to at least hang around the 500 mark until improvements to the roster could be made. And then you look at, well, where are those improvements to the roster going to come from? Well, it's tough to say, because when you look at what the Marlins have in the minors, for example, I do want to give a shout out to a Paul McIntosh at catcher, who I think could come into the major league roster. And I'm not going to sit here and guarantee success for any player, for any prospect, but I do think that's something worth exploring. When you look at the power numbers that he's put up, the on base numbers that he's put up in each of his first seasons with the Miami Marlins, you see a guy that profiles as a really solid power bat at that catcher spot, if things break right for him. You're looking at potentially a Jake Mangum in AAA, who, maybe profiles more as a fourth outfielder, but the guy's hitting, 350 at Jacksonville. And you wonder, okay, well, maybe it's time to consider seeing some of these guys, especially while you have Avi Garcia and Garrett Cooper both on the shelf. Now, how do you make room for those guys? Is, it's a conversation that people much smarter than me are going to have. I think it's going to be difficult. I think at some point you have to choose between John Birdie and Garrett Hampson, just because of their skill sets being as similar as they are. And then I guess it would come down to further injuries as of right now, because at least, I don't think you're throwing out the baby with the bathwater on Garrett Cooper just yet. I don't think you're doing that with John Segura just yet, or with Jean Segura just yet. So, I think you're looking at a situation where right now the Marlins are just trying to tread water as much as they can. I think Yuri Perez is the one move that could be made in the next week or two that I think could pay off and give them quite a bit of dividends. But, you don't bridge the gap without Jazz playing at a much higher level. We talked about Jazz as a potential 30-30, 40-40 guy. If he gets it right, he's got to get it right to get there. And then you look at the outfield. Like I said, Brian De La Cruz is fine. There's way too many other problems on the roster for me to sit here and complain about De La Cruz at the moment. Jesus Sanchez, he's been playing a little bit better, but honestly, those same flaws in his game are still there. I still have concerns about his ability to hit high in the zone, because you look at his swing and you look at the bat path, and it's just no wonder why he gets under everything high in the zone and he's fouling it off. He's a guy that needs to see the ball low in the zone for him to have success. And I think that he's going to have to work with Brant Brown and the staff to kind of help alleviate that, because I think that that's what's holding him back from being, and really living up to the potential that he does have. And he still has that potential. Sanchez is extremely strong, extremely toolsy, unloaded an absolute cannon in yesterday's game out in right field. That was something I don't think a lot of people knew that he had in him. And so you just look at the roster, and I think it's evident that right now you need starting pitching help, and you need the bats in the lineup, specifically Jazz, because I'm going to be very, very honest here. There aren't many players in the lineup when they're right that could elevate this offense. Luis Arias can elevate the offense, has elevated the offense, because they would probably be dead last in baseball if he wasn't on this ball club. But Jazz is another guy that has that kind of potential where he can carry your offense for a week or two if he gets hot. But again, it's just one of those things where we haven't seen it out of him. We just haven't. And you have other players like Jorge Soler, Soler's just streaky. He's going to hit 5 home runs in the span of 10 days, but then he's going to hit 180 for 3 weeks, and then he's going to get hot again. And it's just, there's just not enough consistent production in the lineup to account for something like that. And so I think right now, if you're the Marlins, you're looking at, you call up Perez. I think you hit that button. If I'm them, I'm doing it. He's ready. There's just nothing for him to prove at the AA level anymore. And then I think you evaluate the position players on the roster, and you start thinking about making tough decisions. You know, are they going to sit down Gene Segura? What are they going to do? If Jazz's struggles continue, what are they going to do at the shortstop position if Joey Wendell doesn't produce like they're hoping for him to do? These are things that they have to consider, and it'll be interesting to see how they play out. They start a series in Arizona against Zach Gallen tonight, and my Prize Picks play of the day for this one is I would go Luis Arias over 6 fantasy points. The way that Prize Picks scores it, you're hitting 6 fantasy points with 2 singles, and Luis Arias to get at least 2 singles. I feel pretty good about that. Just considering the type of player, type of hitter that he is. It'll be interesting to see how things look for the Marlins. There's a huge week upcoming, and I think that that'll tell a lot about the rest of the regular season and what things look like going forward for this ball club. Again, I want to thank you guys for watching and listening. I will see you next week at the same time, same place on the 5 Reasons Sports YouTube channel. Remember, like, comment, subscribe. It really helps expand our reach, helps get the content to you guys out in the most effective way possible. Thank you guys, and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.